Hey, the water boy is part of the team too. Welcome to the Meltdown with Vince Thompson.
Welcome back to the Meltdown. I'm Vince Thompson, founder, chairman, and CEO of Melt. And we've got a great Meltdown for you this week. We're going to unpack student athletes and name, image, and likeness. Seems to be on the tips of everybody's tongues right now. Before we get into it, you can follow me on social media at Vinny Inc. or hit me up on LinkedIn. I love hearing from you. We love the feedback we're getting from the audience, so we really appreciate all the comments and feedback, and we're going to keep the cards and letters coming. The 28th Meltdown, believe it or not, getting to the other side, heading to spring, March Madness, hopefully, MLB, hopefully, MLS, hopefully. Starting to see some green shoots out in the community, out in the industry, and amazing Super Bowl. I missed the call. The GOAT demolished the Prince. Record low ratings since 2007, lowest rated. So we'll talk about that today, but we're going to talk about something that you have probably heard something about, and you may or may not quite know or understand what it means. Student athletes and the use of their name, image, and likeness. What do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you a brief history of the student athletes. Teddy Roosevelt established the NCAA in 1906. Ultimately, this name was changed in 1910 to the NCAA. In 71, the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women was established, but this has evolved over time. There needed to be some regulation in the college athletic marketplace. Student athletes are classified as amateurs, but forget the billions that we're going to unpack here in a little bit. And so, but over time, as the money's gotten larger, cable rights have gotten larger, the payouts have gotten larger, the third-tier media rights have gotten larger, multi-million-dollar coaching, buyouts, wagering, fantasy, EA, the imbalance of the benefits to a student athlete versus the lack of have gotten wider and wider. And a lot of things that people don't understand as well. When you hear an athlete signing a 4-year college scholarship, it's actually a 1-year contract, year over year, subject to renewal only by the institution. So many of these athletes never finish. It's also somewhat of an indentured servitude agreement in that in the past, they had to turn over in perpetuity their name, image, and likeness in that Auburn jersey. Hence, Bo Jackson in an Auburn jersey in the former EA NCAA game. So we're going to unpack that in a little while as well. A lot of major players in this space. You're going to hear IMG. You're going to hear the Collegiate Licensing Corporation. You're going to hear EA. Even a ridiculous rule that I had to go through early on while I was building Melt, the NCAA would not allow a former student athlete in a commercially paid ad until they were 5 years out of their collegiate competition. Can you believe that? 5 years they restricted the earnings. And I remember in the early days, I put together a point-of-sale ad for Dasani and the UConn basketball team who had won the national championship years prior, and it literally was like getting a bill through Congress. It was so difficult. So this is a long time coming, and we're going to unpack that and why. What really broke this? Ed OBannon, former collegiate basketball player, was in Las Vegas post-career, many years from playing, great player, selling cars in a Las Vegas dealership, sees his name and image and figure in an EA NCAA basketball game. And he goes, that's odd. I don't recall giving anybody any permission to do that. So Ed OBannon decides to sue in the Ninth Circuit of the United States federal courts. This goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and they rule in favor of Ed O'Bannon and all the former college athletes in EA football and EA basketball, NCAA, that had never been compensated with royalties. All the while, NCAA, member institutions, IMG, Collegiate Licensing Corporation were raking in millions in revenues in royalties without it sharing back. So hence, the tide began to turn in 2009. The revenue and expenses in college football, don't let them cry wolf, don't let them cry foul, are out of control. It's an arms race. LSU, $28 million locker room. My alma mater, Auburn, just announced a $91 million football complex. Now, I get it. Football leads academic recruiting, athletic recruiting, millions of dollars of impression and awareness. We've talked about Nick Saban and his value, but you also have had athletic departments take massive hits from COVID. They're thinking about cutting out non-revenue sports, because what you also have to understand about in the non-revenue sports, many of these kids are paying their own way through school and competing on behalf of the university. But that content is still filling the airwaves of networks such as the SEC network, whom, by the way, receives $7 billion over the next 10 years from the Disney Corporation vis-a-vis ESPN. So once you get in these discussions with the Bs, it really, really changes a lot. And we examine graduation rates, we examine completion rates, we examine what happens to these student athletes with their careers, what happens if they're injured, who's covering those injuries. As I said, I've been around student athletes for 41 years since I stepped on the campus of Auburn University. So I understand them and I understand their plight really well. Many of them come from disenfranchised and disadvantaged situations as well, and they're not trained to be able to cope with any of this. And then they move into training and sleeping and competing and classes and tutoring, and they're not equipped to get out into the real world. So this tide, pun intended, is shifting. In 2019, pre-pandemic, the NCAA nearly had $1 billion in revenue. 90% of that revenue comes in those magical 3 weeks in March Madness from the rights fees that CBS and Turner pays to the NCAA, which they distribute back to the member institutions. SEC just redistributed $765 million back to the 14 member institutions. So these are not rounding errors in major corporations. These are major, major dollars funded by the cable networks, but ultimately funded by our clients and our advertisers. So again, you're about to see this tide shift. Anecdotally, these buyouts are a joke. Let's get paid to fail. And listen, nothing against free enterprise and capital markets and my buddy Jimmy Sexton, but Gus Malzahn, $21 million to fail? Where does that line begin? So I think you're going to see a shakedown out of this. Dabo, $50 million, Jimbo, $70, $80 million, Coach Saban, Mel Tucker. I mean, Kevin Steele, for goodness, got fired at 2 head coaching jobs, Auburn and Tennessee. He's getting paid twice. So there's going to be a day of reckoning coming soon. And by the way, a lot of these guys are my friends, and I don't blame it on the free capital, free market society, but something's got to give at some point. And Vinny Damas called it last year. I thought it might be 2 on the cover, but EA football is coming back. So right now, it's not going to be the players per se. It's going to be images of the players. So they're still trying to circumvent this royalty payout. But my prediction is ultimately there's so much money in gaming. EA had a tremendous year in the pandemic. A lot of people shut in and binge gaming and those types of things. Big case in front of the Supreme Court. Keep your eye on this. It's called the Alston case. But what does it really mean? It's going to the heart of the NCAA claiming that these athletes are amateurs and they're being provided this education, and ultimately it's going to be an antitrust matter. So that is a biggie before the Supreme Court right now. Where do we also stand today? with a democratically controlled Congress, you're going to see more aggressive bills in the hopper, and we're seeing that now, favoring the student athlete. And so, and you see the lobbying dollars the NCAA is spending in the conferences. Will the Power Five break off from the NCAA once this comes down? But there are states starting it now. This July 1st, Florida people can pay those athletes for competing and for their image and likeness and for their social media platforms and their images on TV and their families. And I'm hearing it and seeing it from corporate America right now. And the tidal wave has started. California began in 19. It accelerated to the East Coast. Florida is next. July the 1st, California has moved theirs up and then staggered through 2023. But the reason they're moving toward trying to codify this federally is so there'll be a uniform standard and not an imbalance between kids going to school at Florida or Georgia or California. So a lot bubbling fast. Sarah Fuller, what a story. First female in Division I football to score points. But look at the impact her social media climbed 1,200%. She attended the Biden inauguration. Think about the impact. Think about the role model she's playing. But still today, she's not able to monetize that. If she were a normal student at Vanderbilt, she would be able to be. That's what we're really talking about. You're moving into free speech. You're moving into First Amendment. You're moving into all kind of issues that are far greater and deeper than what they appear to seem on the surface. Nebraska alone, dear friend of mine, former Nebraska player Blake Lawrence, owns Open Doors. It is a software-supported platform that's helping college athletes through the athletic department grow these platforms. It's going to be a rich environment, but you see the potential value and potential earnings that, and again, we see that we tend to focus on the Trevors and the recruiting and all that, but what about a young lady that's an equestrian rider? I use Auburn Equestrian as an example. Putting $5,000 and $10,000 in that young lady's pocket through some local sponsorships, endemic sponsorships, feed and seed, saddles, bits, boots, and all those type of things, that will have a significant impact on that young lady and their families who've sacrificed years of time, money, energy, and resources to get her to that point of being on the Auburn women's equestrian team. But you see some of these numbers here, and if we're able to gather these athletes together in what we call group licensing, and we can deliver 100 to 200,000 of them to corporate America, so much new money. This is going to be a gold rush. First, in 50 years, I've never seen anything like this. In conclusion, it ain't if, but when. Be on the lookout for July the 1st, Florida and Iowa. The Austin case coming down the pike at the Supremes. Billions and billions of dollars of companies that want to get in this space. Is it a solution to diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring in sports business and college sports business? I think it is. So it's going to be great. It's a lot of gray area in there, but at the end of the day, here's 3 points. Long overdue, and it's great for the student athletes, and it's ultimately going to be great for many, many high school athletes who aspire to have a college sports experience, whether it be Division I, II, or III, non-revenue, or Olympics. I think this is going to be a tremendous panacea, nothing but upside from where I sit. I'm Vince Thompson, and don't forget, well, not only that, Top 500 Atlanta magazine again, shameless promotion, and Bill Brand New is red hot at Amazon.com, getting a lot of great comments and feedback. So if you don't have your copy, get it right now. But I'm Vince Thompson, founder, chairman, CEO of Melt, and that's it for this week's Meltdown.
You've just listened to The Meltdown. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at MeltATL, and follow Vince at Vinny Inc., and on LinkedIn as Vince Thompson.